that I kind of connect with, and we don't hear him mentioned too often, but we often enough, Peter, because his behavior kind of illustrates some of my behavior, so it kind of gives me an excuse for how I behave. Matthew 14, 22 through 33. So this morning I'm back there with Stephanie and I'm preparing this lesson, and I says, I'm going to have people out in the audience read. That's, this time. And then I get up here and I realize, well, that's going to require running around with the microphone and finding some subject willing to read all this stuff. And maybe I'll just read it. So I'll just go that way. We're going to talk about this a little bit and then I'll read it. We all know this story, that Peter jumps out of the boat and he goes walking to Jesus and he realizes where he's at, and sploosh, he's in the water. That he impulsively jumped out of the boat, and for that one moment, he had faith until he started to think about it. Until he started to realize, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be able to do this. And I'm like that. I'll start something and I'll give it everything I've got, and then I'll realize, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm standing up here in front of 30 people talking about something that Ben would be better suited for. Faith. Where's Carl at? There you are, in your favorite spot. When you were at Fort Leonard Wood, when you were there, did they have the Sapper Leadership course there at the time? Did they have the tower with the helicopter on top of it? No. Okay.
No, this is back before helicopters went in.
Right. Okay. Still throwing rocks. Okay, gotcha. So Carl and I have a connection between each other. We both were stationed at the same post, but in different eras, obviously. In Fort Leonard Wood, they have a course, the training course, that has, I think it's a 75-foot or 60-foot tower, and they have a Huey. Even though we use Blackhawks now, they have a Huey bolted to the top of this tower, and we have to climb the tower, and of course, they didn't make it easy and just use a ladder. You have to climb up some stuff and get up there. And then you get into the helicopter, and they have a ring in the center with your rappel ropes out the sides of the helicopter. And you have to tie onto that rappel line and step out onto the skids, get into your nice L shape that they show in Hollywood, and release your right hand and rappel out of the helicopter. So, they have this thing called possuming, and it has to do with faith. When you get out onto those skids and you're standing there, you hold, with your left hand, you hold firmly to that rope, and you keep your right hand behind your back, and you keep that rope as far up into your back as you can, and that's the brake that will hold you. And there's probably some of you that have rappelled here. It's no different than rappelling up any other way, but you keep that brake behind your back. You're standing there with an instructor who's screaming at you, acting like a lunatic, and you jump off of those rails. And the first jump, you do everything right. The first release, you do everything right. Then you put the brake behind your back, or maybe you don't. Maybe for a half a second, you think that you should grab with this hand because you're falling. You want to grab that rope. And that's when faith comes to visit you. Of course, in the Army, you can't just go in a pair of pants or shorts and tennis shoes and have a nice time. You have to wear everything that they can figure that they can stick on your body to make you wear. Your rucksack, your helmet, your bulletproof vest, your mop suit, anything else that they can find. And there you are, because you didn't listen, hanging upside down in the possum position with all that stuff wrapped around your neck. And then immediately, the way the rope is made, it starts to unwind. And you start spinning faster and faster. And you're 10 or 12 feet down from the helicopter, and you're 40 or 50 feet off the ground, and you're just spinning yourself into a coma, or until you realize, let go, dummy. Just let go. Have some faith, because the rope has you. I told Ben 2 years ago, probably, that I would like to use that illustration in a study. And, once you start to do what you're supposed to do, faith works. But when you start to lean on your own understanding and not apply what God has applied to your life starts to spin completely out of control until you wake up and start to do what's right again. So back to Peter. I'll read that and think about that. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up onto the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by waves, for the wind was against them. Has anybody ever experienced that in a little boat, by the way? I've been out goose hunting in February and had the wind pick up, and I've had buddies hanging on the front of my boat, white-knuckled, with like ice water coming over the boat. And this image is in my mind, hanging on the gunnels or on the sides of that boat, hoping you don't swamp. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. Does that paint an image in your head? You've got these waves rocking all over the place. You're scared to even be in the boat. Go ahead.
How about the middle of the North Sea in the middle of a hurricane?
That'll do it. Yeah. It's uncontrollable. People get sick. They can't, you can't get your bearings at all. And now, here comes Jesus walking on the water. It's phenomenal to paint that picture in your mind of what's going on. In the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But the disciples saw him walking on the sea. They were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And here comes Peter. And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why do you doubt?" Excuse me. And that's it right there. Why do you doubt? You of little faith. How much faith do we need? Go ahead.
I know why I have my doubts when I have them, mainly because of myself.
I think you might have prepared this study with me earlier. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your path. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. And I think that's what gets a lot of us a lot of the time is we're out here working and living in the world, and we start to lean on our own abilities because that's what we've been taught our whole lives. I mean, when we start to learn how to walk, we don't see God there. When we start to navigate through the world, learning how to read and our social lives and the people that we're around, we don't understand that God's there unless we have a family that's teaching us that every step of the way. And even then, we gain a fleshly knowledge, a belief in our own abilities. I can do this. You know, little Alvin's pretty proud of all the things that he can do. And some of his ideas get to be a real mess to clean up. In the men's meet we had a couple weeks ago, we were talking about how, I actually brought up the subject of how our flesh and our spirit are two different entities, and our flesh wants what the flesh wants. This is all our flesh knows. How old are we? Well, I'm going to be 54, right? But spiritually, how old am I? Look at yourself, Carl from the Stone Age. But I've talked to you, and I've spent some time with you. And how old is your spirit? Is it as old as the physical Carl? Or is there still this young, vibrant guy inside of you that's alive and full of energy and feisty and ready to do something, you know? That's what I'm saying. Like, in every one of us, we wake up every day, and I'm still Scott. I don't know that fat old guy in the mirror. That guy, somebody left him in. That's not me. You know, and I'm sure a lot of you are that way. You know, the spiritual side of you is going to go on forever. There isn't a time limit. There isn't an age on that. There's knowledge. There's understanding, compassion, love, all these things that we need to learn and become part of our spiritual side. And then we have a war between physical and spiritual. Right? Go ahead, Susan.
Like as you go along on your Christian walk, you know, you unfortunately, you know, for some of us, we have to have God like prove himself to us over and over again before we just let go of the rope in front and use the brake in the back like you were talking about. And then when you finally do that, you're like, oh, yeah, he's got me. He had me the whole time, you know, like he was there for me. He was going to, you know, pick up the pieces or whatever. But until you like actually just like let go and let God, you know, it's a trite old saying, but it's not all that trite because it's exactly what Proverbs 3 says, you know, is like you've got to just actually let him, you know, take control and not be fearful, because fear is a killer, man. It'll keep you stuck. Really, really stuck. And, you know, whenever you finally, like, take that step, then things oddly start to fall in place.
Yeah.
But it's not all that odd. It's just him, you know.
Some of you, I'll get to you in a second, Steve. Some of you Bible scholars back there, the verse that says, faith comes by hearing of the word. What's that verse? Romans 10:17. Right. So here we are today, not serving the physical side of ourselves, because the physical side of ourselves would say, I want to lay in bed, I want to go have breakfast, I want to go get ready for some ball game, I want to go fishing, whatever. And here we are because of faith, trying to hear more of the Word and apply more of the Word to our lives and be with other people of like-minded faith and build one another up. That's our whole purpose, to develop that faith instead of the physical side. And there's some of our members that we can look around and we can say, oh, maybe they're serving the physical side today. But go ahead, Steve.
It seems to me, in my experience, that it varies from day to day, or time to time, and from circumstance to circumstance. You may have more faith, more confidence in God in one circumstance, but then another circumstance comes up and it seems different. I don't know. It's not a constant thing.
I think talking about having different levels of faith each day, we can actually reflect on our own lives and see when we were living by faith and when we were serving ourselves, even though maybe when we were serving ourselves, we were denying, oh no, I'm just taking care of business, I'm just doing whatever. But you can see the ebbs and flows of our faith. There's some of us here that have had so many tests to their faith. I can't believe that they're here and they're learning and they're working through it because of the fight that they've been through. And those people, you know who you are. You help me. When I see the struggles you go through, and you don't walk around looking for a Band-Aid or looking for everyone else to carry your struggles, that is just so uplifting to see people that have fought through things and they're still here on the right side of, of life, still working at it. So I saw some different parts of faith in the recent events in Stephanie and I's lives, our family's lives, with Stephanie's grandfather passing. And to see someone on their deathbed, and many of us have, I haven't seen someone so close to me there until now, but to see someone there that had every faith that he would see us on the other side, that makes such a huge difference, knowing that he knew where he was going. At the end, he couldn't talk, and he couldn't swallow, and he couldn't breathe. And Stephanie sang a hymn to him, and he sang it. He tried to sing it. Wow. Faith is powerful. I think I might have missed one verse, but we're going to go back to it. Matthew 4, 3 through 4. We're used to it with Jesse back there. We're all familiar with this also. Jesus is being tempted by Satan, and it says And the tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by the word that comes from the mouth of God." And that's where we need to base our faith. Something that's helped my family a lot, and it's really helped, and I don't even know how we actually got into doing this, but I think having teenagers, we had some dust up of one sort or another, and we said, that's it, we're going to do a devotional every morning and start to work on, how we start our day and, all this stuff. And at first, your typical guy that goes to work every day, only great, there's something else I got to do before I get out the door. Great, well, I'll do this. But it's been great for us, and we've done it almost every weekday, over a year probably, Steph, maybe? Yeah. And it starts our day, even though it's teenager level, it's based on teenage stuff, but it still gets your mind thinking spiritually, and we start our day as a family of faith and go out the door after we pray. And it has changed our perspective every single day that we try to do that, and it's helped us with those highs and lows. And there's been days, I'm sure Stephanie can relate, that I've been sitting there on the couch, going through these devotionals, and I haven't been able to connect, and I think there's probably times that we all come here and there's so much coming into our lives, so much bombardment from Satan that we're not really here, There's so much eating at you that you could hardly listen. But there's some almost magical way that affects your mind and helps you get through some of these trying times and these difficult times. I would recommend for all of us, for our faith, I would absolutely recommend starting your day on the Word of God and a prayer. And it doesn't take that long, but the effects of that are so powerful for your day and for your Christian walk and for your life. Let's see here. That's all the verses I gave you, huh, Sharon? Does anyone else have a favorite faith verse that they'd like to bring up? According to the clock, we have another hour left, so. He's coming.
Not necessarily a verse to go to, but whenever you're talking about the strength of faith and how much faith it takes to do things, one of the things we struggle the most with is laying our burdens down at the cross and just letting them go. And it takes so much faith to be able to do that. And so many people struggle with that, whether it's forgiveness that you're not giving to yourself, whether it's forgiveness you're not giving to somebody else, whether it's... No, just needs to turn down a little bit. Turn it down, Sharon.
I thought you had a
Nobody wants to
pacemaker.
hear me that loud. But whenever we think about, what it actually takes to lay those burdens down and just give them up to God and allow Him to have control of your life, it takes so much faith for that. And that's one of the things we struggle so much with. There's so much pain, so much, decimation that Satan has done in our past. And for us to be able to live freely and not worry about that, it takes so much faith. And that's one of the things, like prayer life, that's how one of the tools that I was able to come to be able to get across to that and just let those things go. And, Val accuses me oftentimes that I don't worry about things enough. And, that's that's a tool. That's a direct response to having faith and being able to let those things go. And so many times you see somebody struggle and you talk to them about how much heartache they have, and part of that's because they don't have enough faith to let the things go. They're still worrying about every little thing.
That's true. We're resurrectors of our things that we give to God. We like to give it to God, and then we go, I can do it. I can do it myself. I take care of it. You screwed it up just fine on your own. Just give it to God and let him handle it for you. Go ahead.
My absolute favorite is, it's not quite a scripture verse or anything, but it's faith over fear. And someone had given me a little wooden plaque type thing, and in the inside it was made of ceramic, and it said faith over fear. The one day it had fallen and cracked, and when that was given to me, I was having a tough time with things, okay? And so I tried to just piece it together. And to this day, that little plaque says faith over fear, and it was cracked, but it was fixed. So.
That's pretty cool. The one over here, Heather.
So I don't have a verse, but I have something touching on what we were talking about. 2 years ago, I was in a really bad car accident where I almost died. Ever since then, my mantra in life has been faith over fear. Yesterday, I received 2 rings, one that says faith over fear, and another that says Jesus, in him I can do anything. So it's kind of believing my faith is bigger than my fear.
It's an interesting concept. We all know where fear comes from. And for some of you, I'll just reiterate that I've said it before. Fear doesn't come from God. If you think of Adam and Eve when they were here in the garden, everything was perfect, and there was no fear, there was no death, there was no illness, there was nothing. They had nothing to fear. I don't even think that they were supposed to die, right? What would you be afraid of at that point? So we know that fear comes from Satan. And where does faith come from? God. Go ahead.
So, to kind of run off of that thought, whenever I think of faith, I think of Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 through 8, which reads, "But God, who is rich in mercy because of his great love, with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenly places with Christ. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." And then that's Paul to the Ephesians, which leads me into the book of Romans, chapter 8, verses 18 through, we'll go 25, which reads, "For I consider that the suffering of this present time not to be worthy to be compared to the glory that will be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility," or to the fall, like you said, with Adam and Eve in the garden, "not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. Because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. And then I'll skip to 24. For we were saved in this hope. But hope that is seen is not hope. For why does one still hope for what he sees? But we hope for that which we do not see, but we eagerly wait for with perseverance. So to kind of go off of faith and hope and grace, because they are, like the Trinity, all they're knit together. Adam and Eve, whenever they were cast out of the Garden of Eden, were given hope, which they were not able to see at the time, because God said to Eve in Genesis 3:16, I shall put enmity between you and the serpent, between your seed and his seed. He shall bruise his heel, and your seed shall crush his head, the proto-evangelion, where we see Christ for the first time. So they're given hope. And then they have faith in that. Faith leads Abraham to leave his family, to go all the way out to Canaan. And then you get the story of the Bible, which is one large story of hope given to man by God. They have faith in that hope, and eventually it culminates with Jesus giving us grace through that faith and that hope. So those are the scriptures that kind of tie into my head whenever I think of faith and what we can expect in the days to come. If it's been shown for all, you have a library in your back pocket with 66 books. If you can see all of these people had faith in something that most of them didn't even get to see, and we have gotten to see it, then we have the book on top of it all to see it. It's so easy to have faith in something that's been proven repeatedly that it's a wonderful thing just to be a Christian, because you know you're on the straight and narrow path.
I think that the thing that's most important with that is that you have to feed your faith. You actually have to present to yourself the things that build your faith. You can't just go out into the world and expect faith to come along and hit you in the face and be like, oh, I have faith now. You know, we all become Christians, and when we become Christians, we come out of that water. I know myself, I came out of the water expecting, even though they told me, you know, it's going to be different, but it's not going to be, you know, somehow like you're changed somehow. I came out of the water and I'm like, oh, I'm baptized now. I'm wet. That's it. You know. Go ahead, Amber. He's coming. He's almost there.
As we were talking about the faith over fear, I couldn't help but think of Joshua 1:9, where it says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." And thinking of this whole faith jumping at you, in the verses before that, God has to tell Joshua to be strong and courageous twice. And it's almost like he has to remind him, you can do this. You can take over after Moses passes, and you can bring these people to their promised land. And then at the very end, some of the leaders of the Israelites are answering Joshua, and the last words they speak to him is, only be strong and courageous. It's like they have to keep reminding him that you can do this. You can have faith that we will get through this. So
I think faith is a lot of work, but it's easy work if you just do it. You know, just commit yourself to doing faithful things. And if it's not of faith, what is it? It's not anything of value, that's for sure. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. If no one has anything else they'd like to add, we'll wrap it up and get ready for our worship service. All right, thank you guys.